Okay, we are looking at lesson number 5 here, and this is all about solving problems using trigonometry. So remember, we're going to be using our SOHCAHTOA for the most part, and if we can also always use our Pythagorean theorem. And remember, that's when you have two sides of a right angle triangle. But for most of these, we are going to be using our sine, cosine, and tan. Now, really good advice. You want to do a sketch for all of these. So no matter what it is, you're going to want to sketch out your diagram, and it gives you a way better idea of what's going on. So before we start, there are a couple of terms we want to talk about. First is this, angle of elevation. What this means, this is the angle looking up. So when they say angle of elevation, it means we are going to start off on the ground and then we are going to look up. The angle of elevation is going to be that little angle in there. Okay? Later on in the lesson, we'll look at angle of depression, and that's going to be the opposite. So let's take a look at this here. So it says we have a boat. It's 100 meters from the base of a cliff. So let's say this is our cliff, and here we have a little boat. And the angle of elevation from the boat to the top of the cliff is 42 degrees. So if here's my boat and here's my top of the cliff, remember my angle of elevation is this angle in here, and so it's 42 degrees. It says how tall is the cliff. So that's going to be my unknown. And the only other number I have here, it says 100 meters from the base of the cliff. So here is that, and here's my little boat. Sweet. So this looks like a triangle we've seen many times. Some people like it with these little pictures in here. Some people would just prefer to redraw it as a triangle that we are used to. That would be x, 100, and 42. So we're going to try to solve for x here. Okay. Very first thing we want to do is we want to label all of these things. So here is my hypotenuse, here's my opposite, here's my adjacent. So which ratio am I going to be using? Well, I need something that has opposite in it, and I need something that has adjacent in it, because those are the two things I'm interested in. I need to know my opposite, and I already have my adjacent. So if I look up here at SOHCAHTOA, which has opposite and adjacent? Well, it's the TOA, tan. So we're going to use tan x equals opposite over adjacent. Tan of my angle, and my angle is 42, equals opposite, which is x, over my adjacent, which is 100. Okay, at this point you can go ahead and take that tan 42 and turn it into an actual number, and that number is 0.9 equals x over 100. And here you can multiply both sides by 100, or just multiply diagonally, whatever you'd like. So we multiply both sides by 100, and we get x equals 0.9 times 100, x equals 90. Perfect. Next, from a point 8.5 meters from the base of a tall tree. So if here's my tree, and it says the tree is 6.2 meters tall, and then we have a point that is 8.5 meters from it. It says, what is the angle of elevation? From this point here, the angle of elevation is going to be whatever that angle is in there. Okay? So here's my triangle. Here's my angle of interest. What do I have here? Well, let's start by labeling everything. So here's my hypotenuse. From this angle, here's my opposite, and here's my adjacent. And now we need to figure out what are we going to use. Opposite and adjacent, well, that's the same thing we used last time. That is tan. Lots of these things are going to use tan for word problems. So if you're ever in doubt, tan's always a good place to start, and then check the other ones. So we're going to use tan x equals opposite over adjacent. Tan of my angle, which I do not know, is opposite, which is 6.2, over adjacent, which is 8.5. Tan x equals 6.2 divided by 8.5, so you're going to need to get your calculator out and do that. And we get 0.7294. Now here, we are solving for an angle, which means you need to use second function, or shift. Remember, if you're ever solving for an angle, got to make sure that happens. So then you're going to take that number, use second function here, so we'll shift tan -1 and 0.7294, and I got an x of 36.1 degrees. So just using that tan -1. Okay, next we have an escalator. It's making an angle of 30 degrees with the ground, and it rises a distance of 20 feet vertically. How long is the escalator? So if you've ever been to the mall, you've seen these escalators, and it kind of looks like this. Here's my little escalator track up here. Nice. The escalator makes an angle of 30 degrees with the ground. So here's my angle, 30 degrees with the ground. It says it rises a distance of 20 feet, so that means 20 is going to be my distance here. How long is my escalator? Well, here's my escalator, so that's what I'm looking for. I want to see how long is that. So let's label this thing. We have, here's my right angle, the opposite, the adjacent, and the hypotenuse. And now we got to figure out what are we going to use. So if we have SOHCAHTOA, well, I definitely need my hypotenuse and I need my opposite. Those are the two things that I'm interested in. So what has opposite and hypotenuse in it? That would be SO, or sine. So we use sine x equals opposite over hypotenuse. Sine x equals 20 over x. And now we're going to need to do a little bit of cross multiplication. So this is sine 30 equals 20 over x. So what we can do now, we can cross multiply, or you can reduce it to a number. I think lots of people just like putting it in number form right away. So I'm going to take that sine 30, put it in my calculator, and that gives me 0.5 equals 20 over x. From here, you can turn both things into a fraction, and now we can cross multiply. So I'll bring that over. I'll bring that over. I get 0.5 times x equals 20 times 1, which is just 20. And now divide both sides by 0.5, divide by 0.5, and you get an x value equals 20 divided by 0.5, which is 40 feet. Okay, good word problem here. So it says an isosceles triangle. So an isosceles triangle looks like this. Isosceles triangle means you have two sides that have the exact same length. And it says that length is 6 centimeters here. And then it's got a base of 9 centimeters here. What are the measures of the base angles? So that would be this angle in here and this angle in here. Now, the nice part about this is we know that this isosceles triangle, if we cut it in half, just like this, we can kind of make two little right angle triangles there. So I'm just going to take a look at this one on this side, and I'm going to redraw it here. So we know that this is our right angle, this is 6, and we are looking for this angle here. And do we know anything else? Well, we knew the whole base over here was 9. So if I cut that in half, just for this little part here, what's half of 9? Well, that would be 4.5. And now I can solve for my angle x. So let's label this triangle. We have opposite, we have adjacent, and we have hypotenuse. And we need to use the values we have, which is adjacent and hypotenuse. So if you look at SOHCAHTOA, what has adjacent and hypotenuse? Well, obviously cosine. So we'll use cosine x equals adjacent over hypotenuse. Cosine x equals adjacent, which is 4.5, divided by 6. Turn that into a number, and we get 0.75. Now, we are looking for an angle. And we are looking for an angle. That means you need to use second function or shift. And if you take out your calculator, put that in, you go cosine, or you use shift cosine, so you get cosine -1, 0.75. That's going to give you an angle of 41.4 degrees. Okay, and just like I said at the beginning, we need to look at one more definition. That is going to be the definition of angle of depression. So how that looks. Angle of depression means we start out at the top, and then we look down. So here is my angle of depression. And angle depression is a little trickier, and I will show you why that is. So we have a boat, and it's in the water 17 meters from the base of our cliff. So here's my cliff, and we have a boat right here. And now it says this distance in here is 17 meters. Now, from the top of the cliff, the angle of depression to the boat is 30 degrees. Let me show you how that looks. So remember, we said for angle of depression, we want to start out straight, and then we drop it, whatever that angle is. And here our angle is 30 degrees. So we're going to drop this. So this angle in here is going to be 30 degrees, and that's going to connect to my boat. Perfect. So it looks like I have my triangle right here. I have this triangle here. But here's the problem. We know that this is our right angle, but we don't know anything about this angle in here. We know that this angle is 30, but what does that mean this angle is? Well, let's think. If I have this little right angle like I do over here, and I know that this is 30, what is this angle in here? Well, it's actually pretty easy to figure out because we know a right angle is 90 degrees, and if we used up 30 over here, how much is left for this spot in here? Well, of course it would be 60 degrees because those two things need to add up to 90. So for that, we're going to use our 60 degrees in here. That is the trickiest part about this. If you can get that part down, you're in very good shape. A lot of people struggle with that. So make sure, if you need to rewatch that, go ahead and do it. Angle of depression, normally going to have to take 90 minus that angle. Okay? Now, it asks how tall is the cliff, so we can go ahead and try to figure that out. So if this is my angle of reference, I can label this triangle. I'll say this is my hypotenuse, this is my opposite, and this is my adjacent. So I'm looking at adjacent and opposite. Which trigonomic ratio uses that? That would, of course, be tan. So we're going to use tan x equals opposite over adjacent. Tan of my angle, and my angle is 60, equals opposite, which is 17, over adjacent, which is x. And here we're going to pretty much immediately turn that tan 60 into a number. And remember, you're not solving for an angle here, so you just use regular tan. So we have tan 60, and that gives me 1.732 equals 17 over x, and create a nice little fraction sandwich there. Bring that x up, bring that 1 up. We get 1.732 equal x equals 17 times 1, which is just 17. To get that x by itself, divide both sides by 1.732, divide by 1.732. And when we do that, we can cross out those two. And if you take your calculator, do 17 divided by 1.732, you get a value of x of 9.815. And that's it. Make sure you are doing your quizzes and getting ready for your test, which follows this lesson. Okay? For that test, you are going to need to print it out, fill it all out using your pencil, and then make sure you take a picture of it with your phone or scan it, and then upload it and submit it to the Dropbox. So with the exception of the tests, every quiz, of course, is all done online, but the 3 tests are going to be the only thing you're actually going to need to print out and then submit back to us. Okay? Excellent. Good luck.